I've been told by everybody up on this roof that they're all off the roof. I am on the roof of exposure 4. Got fire through the roof of the fire building in the entire rear section.
Now remember, given the payday, has he been accounted for? Okay.
610B. That was the name date. 610B.
I'm here. We got a fire. 1.5-story, single-family dwelling. Fire shown from the second floor. Give me a second alarm on this.
Coming up to the top floor. I got people hanging out the top floor windows with a baby.
Commercial building. A lot of fire, a lot of smoke. Go ahead and strike a third alarm on my orders on this.
Got people on the front fire escape here with windows vented below them. We need somebody up there.
Yeah, let them know we got a job. I'm pulling up now. Second alarm, I got a 1-story single-family frame. Heavy fire showing from the attic.
So we're using all hands. We got one line stretch, fire on the 4th floor, second line being stretched. Primary searches are underway.
Hey, welcome to our Fire Engineering Podcast, The Command Post. I'm Chief Rick Lasky, along with my good buddy, Chief John Salka. And we have a topic for today's show that is very close and dear to our hearts, and that is the volunteer fire service. If you've been with John and I before, you know not only do we teach programs such as the volunteer firefighter defining commitment, the volunteer company officer, and all the other things that we do when it comes to, plus again our careers spanning over 40 years, and most of that with, if you're in John's case, still with the volunteers. Very, very special group of people, and we've got a great group of folks joining us today, a bunch of guys that truly get it and have a passion for the fire service that John, I wish more people had, more firefighters had. Excuse me. So let me introduce them real quick. First of all, and it's kind of funny because everybody here is so close. We're all such good friends, which is kind of cool for today. But first of all, is Chief Jeff Bryant from Amboy, Illinois, the Amboy Volunteer Fire Department. Jeff's been a fire service 32 years. John and I are both honored because we're honorary fire chiefs with Amboy, and I'm actually an active member on their roster for all of our listeners, so I can make calls. It takes me a while to get up there, about 14 hours, but I can get up there and clean up the next day. But we've got Assistant Chief Nick Dingus from the Sublette, Illinois, right down the street from Jeff. And again, Nick, and I'm going to talk about Craig in a second, a bunch of us have worked in some different departments throughout our careers. We've moved and settled in and different things like that with families and that. But Nick, how many years do you have in the fire service?
This is my 24th year.
24th year. And another second, am I guessing second generation or third?
So I'm the second of 3 generations.
Second of 3.
Actually, let me take it back, Chief. I misspoke. I'm the third of 4. I apologize. It was my grandfather, father, my brother and I, and now we've got 4 nephews.
So you weren't like, you didn't just fall into this accidentally. You were grabbed by the arm, twisted, and said, you're going to do this and love it.
So when I turned 18, I'll make a long story short. When I turned 18, my neighbor was a captain. My dad was the assistant chief. The neighbor knocks on the door. He said, hey, fire meeting's tomorrow night. You need to show up. I go, okay, that sounds great. Hands me a pager, and we had a call, and like 8 hours later, and I was on my first fire truck, and I was hooked.
Well, I know. I'm going to tell a story a little bit later about my first experience with dealing with my chief and that, and it was pretty awesome. And then we have Craig. Hey, Craig is the career chief, and the career chief in Hanover Park, Illinois, on the northwest side. We were just talking before we went live about Cubs fans versus Sox fans and all that stuff, and everybody that knows me knows I'm a South Sider, even though I'm wearing my Blackhawks t-shirt today. But Craig is another great person here that has done both the career and the volunteer side. And guys, welcome.
Thanks, Chief.
And then my buddy John, is it? I always say, is it 43 or 44 years now in the volunteer fire service?
Who knows? Who knows?
Well, and for our guests, you guys have to understand. I think I mentioned this when we were in Amboy a couple of times. John did like 30 plus years with the FDNY and the busiest of companies. I mean, you're talking 11 truck rescue 3 in the Bronx and squad 1 in Brooklyn and 48 engine in Bronx and running over 6,000 runs a year and 10 to 15 fires a day. And then the 18th Battalion, he had a driver that whole time in the 18th Battalion. And he's been a volunteer for 40 something years. He's the chief of his volunteer fire department in South Blooming Grove in Orange County, New York. And now, guys, when he runs down to his fire car, okay, he jumps in the car, the pager goes off, he runs down, he jumps in the passenger seat, and there's nobody to drive him because he doesn't have an aide. So he has to get out and get back in and go. So You knew that was coming, buddy. You knew that was coming. But
I wish. There are days I wish. There are days, but sometimes it's nice just being by yourself in a car too. Anybody who's done it knows that.
Well, I've been with you in your car, so I can honestly say I know what it's like to be in a NASCAR now. So, well, let me to our guests and throw this out there. Maybe Jeff, Nick, and Craig, however you want to do it. I haven't seen, and maybe I've just missed it. The city of Chicago, activate their tornado sirens for a long time. I mean, I've seen the suburbs do it, but usually by the time it gets close to the city of Lake, it usually, But you guys had some badass storms that came through. Yesterday?
Yeah, they came through. I haven't talked to Jeff or Nick to see what happened over their direction. Usually it'll hit them and then it'll continue on over toward us. We had some pretty substantial winds. They hit our tornado sirens, and the storm was moving. It went over us at a pretty good rate, about 20 minutes, and it was gone, but left trees down, power lines down, roof damage, things like that, and then on into the city. So it's a little different, a little faster moving storm than what we're accustomed to, at least what we saw here in the Chicago area. I don't know what these guys picked up on as it passed over them heading toward us.
Well, Jeff or Nick, you guys had some activity by you, didn't you, in your area or close by?
We were very blessed. Everything went north and south. We were like on the bubble. And I think I was talking to Nick earlier. We've had a couple near misses with tornadoes that probably cleaned out a lot of the bad trees.
Yeah, okay.
So we didn't have much damage. North and south did, but not us.
Well, John just had it. Go ahead.
No, I missed our district by 7 miles to the south. I missed Jeff's district, which we border by 8 miles to the north. And actually, I drove through, I guess, a kind of a heavy hit in Cherry Valley yesterday. I was headed up to Beloit, Wisconsin, and the tornado sirens went off, the alerts went off, and usually not too bothered by it. But when I saw the construction workers running, I figured it was time I need to pull off the road. So I ended up at Cherry Valley's firehouse for about 15 minutes yesterday.
Well, it looked nasty on the radar. It looked nasty on the whole radar. Pretty bad. I mean, the line was pretty dramatic in size and length, but it looked pretty nasty. And John, you had remnants of the hurricane come up and knock your power out for 6 days?
Yeah. I mean, it was what was left of that hurricane. It certainly wasn't a hurricane, and a lot of folks are wondering why so much damage and so many trees and so many poles and loss of electricity. I was out of power for 6 days, although I'm generator equipped, so I was all right. But there was a lot of people out of power for a long time, and I ended up speaking to a friend of mine who works for the utility company, who ended up being one of the guys on the job at my place, getting the wires back up. And he said, actually, from a perspective of damage, it was one of the worst storms they've had in 20 years. Way more severe than some of the big name storms that went through and got headlines. Well, I know, like I said, you just got it on. I know I was talking to you every day, and thank God you got the generator for your house, for your family and stuff. But again, now, besides the storms, the big storm that everybody's talking about right now is this whole COVID thing. And John and I did an old school podcast, for those who follow us on old school, for our listeners, on social distancing and training. And I guess that's the first question to throw out to you guys, because we're talking about, Amboy, Sublet, we're talking about Hanover Park on the career side, but Craig, all your years as a volunteer, and I know how passionate all three of you are. All three of you teach, instruct, whether it's for the state academies, the chiefs associations, for your local community colleges and all that. You have such a passion. That's why we love you so much too, for teaching. How are you guys doing? I mean, and John could talk about what he's doing his volunteer. What are you guys doing with the whole COVID thing, with the social distancing and training wise with your volunteers, let alone meetings? I'll throw that maybe at Jeff first, and we go Nick and then Craig. Jeff?
In mid-March, when everything started locking down, we ourselves even locked down, only restricted everybody to minimum staffing on calls, no in-person training. We continue contact through EMS, through virtual learning, and slowly as things progressed a little bit better, and the governor started deeming that firefighter training was essential, we started opening back up as far as our in-house training. We try to social distance when we can. We set our knowledge-based learning, we try to sit 6 feet apart. We monitor temperatures. Like I said, it's just tough. You can't, you can social distance all you want in the firehouse, and 5 minutes later you want to call and throw that out the window. I mean, there's only, and I've talked to Chief Haig about, some departments are wearing face coverings in engines when they can't social distance on the way to the call, and based on the call, or they might be wearing, still people wearing face coverings if they're doing a CO or as a hazard call. But the training part, we've lost a lot of ground. That's going to be hard to make up. We have our annual fire school, which you guys are participated in. Chief Haig was actually, and Nick was on the docket to instruct all 500 guys. We moved it back one date to August, and then we moved it back to 2021 because we just don't know where we're going to be at that time. So those are things that on the training side that we've kind of missed that bubble. There are people that are in the middle of an EMT class, so they took 2 months off. They're not doing real well because they got out of that cycle of meeting twice a week at wherever they're going. We have 3 different classes going, I'll show you. And then we also, basic operation firefighter, same way. We switched over to distant learning, but not everybody's a good distant learner, and we can't get any of their as far as their hands-on skills done. So, it's really hurt the volunteer service because we didn't have enough time to get everything done anyway. So that really put a wrinkle in, and also the perspective of the public. How can we be hanging out at the firehouse if they're told not to do anything? So,
okay, and John, I've talked about this many times before. Just what you said, it's like, first of all, it's hard enough to accomplish everything you accomplish with the mandates and regarding training and certifications and research and all this stuff. And the mandates, Biggie, that states are looking at you going, you haven't met your hours in that. Now you have this thrown in there. And like you said, not everybody's that good at using Zoom or whatever platform and, all this different stuff. We still have a job to do. And it makes it tough. And I think you're right. We've lost time. I don't think we'll ever make up. The only thing we do is keep pushing forward and keep adjusting. Like you said, finally to where, and John will talk a little bit how they figured out to make some things happen. But because I know Amboy, I know all 3 of you. I mean, you guys are very aggressive when it comes to training and keeping your people prepared. John and I brag about you guys pretty much wherever we go. But Nick, how are things working in Sublet with where you're at?
Yeah, kind of along the same lines. I mean, we do a lot of the things that Jeff mentioned in terms of social distancing. We did find that we did do some Zoom calls initially. Actually, Chief, you participated in the one that we did more as an appreciation. One of the things that I found hard was, the less we're together, even on calls and or training, it's harder to keep the volunteers as engaged. So we tried to use Zoom and some social media platforms to keep us together as best we could. To Jeff's point, even going on calls, and I'll give EMS as an example, we would send a driver and 2 EMTs or paramedics on the call. We would only send one in to evaluate the patient and make a determination if we're going to send everybody in the house. And in many cases, we'd walk the patients out. So we're trying to do the best we could during a period, especially back in March, April, and early May of great uncertainty. As we learn more about this virus, we modified some of the things in our response, but always keeping our members protected, both on the call side and on the training side. As Jeff stated, on fire and EMS, we can't train enough. And I've always believed that, and a huge proponent of it. I'm also a proponent of, you can throw 1,000 books at a fire and never put one out, which means we still have to keep our hands-on skills there. And we went back to hands-on training back in June. Everything outside, obviously. So we tried not to be inside, not to be in a meeting room, and try to socially distance. We started with some pump training. Actually, Jeff's department and my own, we did a couple together, which worked out extremely well. We have an acquired house we're going to use for the next couple of months. Do the best we can with that. Actually, the 3 of us did some live fire training last week up in East Dundee, Illinois, and same thing. Now, in that case, everybody's wearing their breathing apparatus. Oh, you're outside first for the talking part. And of course, a breathing apparatus on the inside. But it's just because of all the uncertainty out there, I still believe we have to have hands-on training. And but we have to take as many precautions as we can and be as smart as we can to get through this for however long it's going to last moving forward.
Well, a great point there. And again, like I said, we can't emphasize enough our belief and our support and our thoughts when it comes to training. And again, we know how 3 of you guys, how you are when it comes to whether it's Hanover Park or Sublet or Amboy, all 3 departments that you guys represent when it comes to training. John, South Blooming Grove, we talked about this on another show, on our old school show. Walk us through what you guys did, the adjustments you made with South Blooming Grove, with your volleys, when this all started to where you're at now?
Well, pretty similar to the other guys. We shut down a facility. Obviously, nobody's wandering around, coming in, visiting, hanging out, or anything like that, except for a call. And when a call came in, obviously everybody just had to get their gear, get on the rig. We limited responses. We cut everything down, except for structural fires. Everything else we limited to just 4 people on the rig. Obviously, 2 people in a cab. You need a driver and an officer. And I limited even the cabs that had, crew cab that was able to hold 4 or 5 or even 6. I just put 2 people back there. Opposite sides, windows open. Didn't matter where they were going, MVA, whatever it was. If we need more people, we'll call more rigs. We'll have more guys coming. So we tried to make it simple for the guys. And again, you know what? Everybody's coming there full of piss and vinegar. They want to jump on a rig. They want to make the call. And if they're not one of the first 3 or 4 guys, they're standing there when the rig rolls out. So we're trying to, I'd roll the second rig if I could, with 4 more guys heading out towards whatever we had going on and things like that. We held our first company meeting actually in June, and we did it on the apparatus floor. We get the drive-through bays, so we had bays open on both sides. We did the social distancing with the seats. Everybody had to wear, face coverings, and that worked out very well. And conveniently, about 10 years ago or 8 years ago, they built a really nice, I don't know what you want to call it, out in the back of the firehouse, a nice big cabana back there. So we have a little kitchen and a refrigerator and a bar and snacks and you're outside. And you're outside, which is great. So at least that was one thing, that sort of one little social thing that continued, not initially, but after a couple of months, we started heading out there after drill, and guys would hang out for another hour or so. Of course, everybody had the face pieces on, but, not face pieces, face coverings. But it held the guys together a little bit. And you mentioned it before, Nick, that was an important part of it. That's something that you don't have in a career fire department. Not that you don't have the guys together, but it's a career job. Guys are coming to work, they're hanging out, maybe they're trying to limit exposure to each other, but they're still all there. And then the volunteers, when we started cutting back on activities and cutting back on access to the building and cutting back on training, nobody was really fading away, but some guys were a little like, hey, anybody see Tommy? Where's he been? He didn't make Wednesday night, but, so we tried to get a couple of things going that could keep the guys' level of interest and having outside drills. We just ran outside drills after a while.
And your guys have adjusted. I mean, just like the fire service always does, they've adjusted to everything going on, haven't they?
Oh, absolutely. I think everybody has. Yeah.
Well, and Craig, you guys are very fortunate because you guys reside in a region that has probably one of the best fire supply companies I've ever been around in my life. John, what do we always mention on our show? Was Dingus? Dingus. I would ask Assistant Chief, one of our guests, Assistant Chief Nick Dingus, how you pronounce the name of that business, but I'll say it again, Dingus Fire Company, the fire supply. I mean, just you guys are fortunate because that's like having a guy. I had a guy that worked for me that was on his days off was a salesman for Pierce, and we had Pierce, and it was like, God, that was like, it's like the Willy Wonka golden ticket. You've got someone that just can get you into the chocolate factory, and you've got a group, you and Jeff, that you've got these resources available to you to help you with everything, not just what's going on with COVID, but with everything. Craig, you've been such an advocate. Not only do you teach everything related to fire service, you're such a huge advocate when it comes to safety of firefighters. You care so much about firefighters, whether it's mental health awareness or cancer prevention, the rest of this. All the years as a volley, but as a career chief, how are your guys, like everybody's already talked about, I know departments that the career guys are having to wear their masks while they're in the firehouse. They're sitting in recliners watching TV, and they have to, just like anywhere else, you're going to eat, you're going to drink, so whatever. But, one department I'm very close to had they're out 20-something guys with COVID. Nobody's went to the hospital, but some guys have been really sick, like bad flu. But what do you see from your end? Again, I know what a huge advocate you are for what comes to firefighter safety, but what's realistic and what's not, and when it comes to the face coverings and so on.
It's been an interesting experience for me as this COVID event rolled out here in our community since in essence the beginning of time. The police department was responsible for emergency management, and I, as the fire chief, always thought that they did a nice job and never advocated for any type of change. But January 1, of 2020, emergency management, lock, stock, and barrel, every aspect of it was transferred to the fire department. So all of a sudden, what I found is that January 1, I am officially the director of emergency management after trying to avoid being the emergency management director for 30 some years. And we get hit, mid-March with a global pandemic and trying to sort that out. So my responsibility really ranged much more than just fire. It was responsibility for all employees throughout, our entire community. It's interesting as we talk, and it struck me, and you guys have heard me preach in class that there's no difference between whether you're a career firefighter or whether you're a volunteer firefighter. It's the same job. The tactics we're going to implement.
One gets paid, one doesn't.
The fire will hurt you the same way. It's just one gets a paycheck to do it and the other one doesn't. So I was struck. We were talking about what each of the volunteer organizations have been doing as it relates to mask coverings and social distancing during training and all of those challenges and how that was all worked out. And quite frankly, that's exactly what we did in the career side of the scenario. Now, as far as our folks working in the firehouse together, we have told them, stay social distanced. If you're social distanced, you don't have to have your masks on. It'd be a pretty tough shift to have a mask on for 24 hours. So as long as they can stay apart, we let them do that. So they spend a lot of time on the apparatus floor and, yelling back and forth across the apparatus floor. And since they're firefighters, they're pretty good at that. That works out well for them. But when we put them in the rig, they've got their masks or their face coverings on to protect them in just that enclosed space. And then when we get them on the scene, much like you guys, for us, we've got the ambulance. So we're going to pull up. We send one player in to investigate. Everybody else kind of stands at the door. We're getting information from dispatch where they're doing some questioning. So we're trying to do everything we can to reduce that overall risk. What I feel pretty decent about our numbers in Hanover Park since the event came about. I think we're in the 850 range as it relates to the number of residents of our community who have been diagnosed with COVID. So if you run an ambulance, you're going to interact with them. We're going to transport them. We're going to deal with them. And we've done that on a pretty regular basis. However, we've had no significant exposures, and we've had no firefighters get COVID from the job. We've had one firefighter that's diagnosed with COVID, and he got it off duty. So, unfortunately, he was off on vacation, so it didn't bring it back and expose anybody in the firehouse. So we as a community have done I think a pretty decent job, and getting on top of things early, getting masks, getting hand sanitizers, getting some education to our folks right away, whether it be police, fire, public works, wherever. And I think it made a huge difference. It's interesting that you bring up Dingus. Quite frankly, we've been lost.
I keep saying Dingus. I don't know why. I mean, Nick, help me out. Is it Dingus or Dingus? Tell me.
No, Dingus is good. Dingus is good.
Dingus is what you like. All right.
Yeah.
So,
I don't know. I'm like, oh God, I'm sorry.
We'd call these guys and I'd say, hey, I need this, and it would magically appear. So I don't know where they were finding it, but I was getting the resources. Never lacked for PPE at all for the 260 some employees that we were trying to work with here in the village. So if you're going to do something crazy in a disaster, you better have a supplier that'll get you.
Chief, they helped us out here in Texas. Even before that, I mean, with uniforms and other things, but they helped us out. They helped my wife's sheriff's department and other things. And you bring up something that John, you and I talk about this all the time about two things. One is, the difference between a career and volunteer firefighter, because we're working our way through how we're dealing with COVID, both on the volunteer and career side, but as a fire service as a whole. But how many times in class, buddy, we've been there and someone will come up to me and they'll go, God, I love Chief Salka. He got so much experience and he's so funny and he's so good. But Chief, I don't work in the Bronx. I don't go to 6,000 calls a year on my engine. And I always used to say, well, go ask him what he does when he's not in the Bronx. And someone will go, oh, okay. And they go over and John's signing books and they'll go, they say, so Chief Salka, what are you doing out in the Bronx? And he goes, you mean when I'm at my volley department? And I'm like, yeah, he does pancake breakfasts. You know, he does fundraisers. He gets with his buddies. He drives all the way to Buffalo, which is about probably 20 minutes for them. That's about 7 hours in Texas. But anyway, he'll go drive and you know, put the arm on someone to get some free gear and stuff and so on and so forth. But I want to go back to something I say all the time when you said, you know, fire does not care. God, I know we're all on the same pages. Fire will kill you dead. It does not care. And what I usually say in class, and John, you've seen me do this, usually someone will come up and they'll come to get a book or come to talk to us, and you'll hear John or I'll say, so where are you from? And they'll go, oh, I'm from a small career. I'm from a small one-station volunteer department. And both John and I usually, 9 times a day, will cut them off and go, wait. So when you say small, you mean your guys can't get dead like anybody else's guys? They go, well, no, Chief, what I meant is we're not Chicago or FDNY. And John and I will both tell them, well, neither are they. If you look at the metro departments, if you take their numbers out of the numbers every year of line of duty deaths and serious injuries, they're the minority. It's us. You know, like John, how many times you said there's almost 40,000 fire departments in the United States alone. It's us. And I said, show of hands, who's been to the memorial in Emmitsburg? And the guys raise their hands. Okay. So remind me, it's been a little while. There's 2 memorials there, right, for dead firefighters. There's one for career firefighters, and there's one for volunteer firefighters. And if you're from a big department, you go in the front. If you're a small department, you're back. And they're all shaking their heads like, no, it's one. I go, yeah. There's one memorial. You get dead doing this as a volunteer career. It doesn't matter. You get chiseled on the same stone. And I've just said, you have one group that does it for a career, and you have another group that does it, you know, because they want to take care and serve their community, but they're both firefighters. They're both professionals. John, our good friend, Tom Merrill from Snyder, New York. You've been there a bunch of times. Right. He writes the column for Fire Engineering, the professional volunteer fire department, right? Very successful.
And you know what? I mean, it is so true. And I was a volunteer before I even got on the job. And I did my 33 years on the FDNY, got out, and I'm still in the volunteers. So I've been a lifelong volunteer and a career firefighter both. And although the work we do is the same, and you're right, Chief, when you're pulling a ceiling, when you're advancing a hose line, when you're driving a rig, it doesn't matter whether you get a paycheck, whether you're wearing a uniform or whether you're wearing a bathing suit and a T-shirt, and you live next door to the firehouse and you had to jump on at the last minute, right? However, having said that, and agreeing with it, that the work is the same that we do, but so much of the other things that we do is different. The life, the career, the attitude, the work schedule, of a volunteer firefighter sometimes is so different than a career firefighter. And it's funny you mentioned you're the third of 4 generations. I'm the first of 2 generations. I'm the only one in my family that was a firefighter, but now I have one son who's a firefighter. And he's a career guy down in North Charleston, South Carolina. And there's just something about career firefighters, you know what I'm saying? And it's a wonderful thing. I would never take anything away from FDNY or anybody else, but they come in, they go to work, they do their shift. I know guys that love working overtime and hang out between tours, and they love to work like everybody loves to work. But a volunteer firefighter never gets paid. They never get a paycheck. They never get an overtime. They never get. I point to my house and my car and my pool, and I say, look, New York City bought me all of this for going to work. You know what I'm saying? And volunteers can't say that. Matter of fact, a lot of volunteers, it costs them money. It costs them money to be a volunteer firefighter. Sometimes guys lose hours at work or miss a shift somewhere, or they got to replace a pair of clothing or something like that. But it's actually difficult. Sometimes it's harder to keep good, young, or even middle-aged firefighters, engaged and happy and coming back for more sometimes when maybe you don't have the best budget or the best, pile of gear or the nicest rigs in town or something like that. So it is the same. The work we do is the same, but I think those of us that have been in the volunteer fire service for a long time, we recognize that there is a different aspect. There are some different things going on in the volunteer fire service that the career guys just maybe wouldn't even get,
Well, and I like a lot of guys that do both. I know some places they don't want you to do that, but I love those. When I used to say, when I've got someone, I had one time had like 21 guys on my roster where I was chief that were actually volunteer chiefs of their department, not just volunteers, they were chiefs. And I thought, what a cool concept that they would leave where they're getting paid, go home and clean rigs and clean toilets and clean a firehouse for free because they want to make a difference in their community. Now, you said something, John, about the differences between the two and so on and so forth. And we get asked a lot of questions. Why do we teach a volunteer company officer academy and then we do one for the career? And I'm like, well, is it leadership the same? Well, that leadership is the same. But like you just said it, you're dealing with different mechanisms. I mean, you when you're in your career side, we used to say, God bless our career guys, you say you have it made. Because if I can write you up, you can say it's at home, whatever. On the volunteer side, you got people that are working 2 jobs, trying to put food on the table, money to a college fund. They're trying to make their kids recital, their kids' soccer game, and they're still trying to make drill night, meeting night, calls at all different hours. You know what I'm saying? And like you said, a lot of it, some places are lucky to have stipends. We'll talk about it a little bit later, but a lot of these places you get nothing. And our buddy Paul Combs, John, remember he was going to do us a poster. He has a lot of volunteer recruitment, for those of us, our listeners that know who Paul Combs is, that does the drawings. But he has one with that John I asked him to do that just at the top says, hey, like you're yelling, hey, come do this stuff for free. Come spend your own money, put your own gas in your own pickup truck and your own car and your own diesel and be late for your regular job and run out the door when your family's open up Christmas presents and run out, on Thanksgiving and miss birthdays. And so, I think firefighters in general are very special people, but it does take someone very special to be a volunteer firefighter, And John, you hit it right on the head. So let me ask Jeff and then Nick, because again, for our listeners, we're visiting with Chief Jeff Bryant from the Amboy, Illinois Fire Department, Assistant Chief Nick Dingus from Sublet, and we're visiting with Chief Craig Haig from Hanover Park, Illinois. Jeff, you and Nick, both what I always refer to and John refers to, you guys have the Midas touch. You've got this ability. You find grants I've never heard of before. Every time I'm at your places, there's something new there. Nick has that Nick smile that when you go, well, we need this, and all he does is look over his shoulder to that amazing supply company. You know what I'm saying? I mean, and Jeff, all the years, the two of you doing that, what are some of, if we generalize, what are some of the, and we're going to get to some other topics, but what are some of the keys? You guys have incredibly well-respected volunteer fire departments. What are some of the keys to getting there? What are some of the things you guys do that earns that reputation? Maybe start with Jeff first.
It's based on relationships, on working at it every day. I mean, that's the toughest thing. Always trying to progress. I would tell you, I'm very blessed. The job I have allows me to do a lot of things I do in the fire service. So as I work in a different 8-to-5 job, I know Nick only lets me work 8 to noon here. But if I was working an 8-to-5 job somewhere else, I wouldn't be as blessed to do what I do here for our community. And Nick, since 2002, it's always been about not only our community but our neighboring communities. Well, giving them something that's going to be supporting us back.
Exactly. Talk about that. You and Nick. I mean, right now, I know here where I'm at in Texas, the volunteer fire departments are struggling with their fundraisers because the pancake breakfast, the fish fry, the beef brisket thing, Wichita West, very close to the guys there. Ryan Fetzer's the volunteer chief. They're a great, great chief officer, great guy. They've got their craft show they do for fundraising, other things that we were talking about. With so many of those public gatherings for the longest time that were shut down, now a lot of them have found ways, drive through, you can still support and all this stuff and so on and so forth. But the support that you see, not just your departments, but the other volunteer departments in your area, what are they doing to kind of make up for that? Now, maybe Nick, throw it out to you first to I don't know, to make up the difference when it comes to their budgets. I mean, I can't imagine.
Yeah, and it's been difficult. I'll be very honest with you. Our own department, we do a pancake and sausage fundraiser. We bring about 10,000 people to town as part of a community event for a toy show and antique tractor drive. And when those folks didn't come, that impact to us is about $5,000 to $6,000 we lost earlier this year. To offset that, we wrote a generalized letter to everybody in our district. We just sent it out a month ago, and with the receipts back to us, we've raised over $10,000 just with a general letter saying we had a couple key things we were looking to do this year, and the community support has been tremendous. Even though we're in I would say a down economy, and a lot of folks are laid off and have lost their jobs. So even though we're in that kind of in that situation, there's always ways to survive. And you know, to Jeff's credit, we learned our grant writing from Jeff. I'm going to be very honest with you. And back in 2001, right before 9/11 happened, when I was on Sublette the first time, when I started there in '97, we had the oldest equipment. We had an extremely limited budget. And when I say that, my career salary in Rockford was more than the entire Sublette budget, which is pretty incredible. And so I wanted to write some grants, learn how to do that when I was in my early 20s, and I was unsuccessful early on. And I couldn't figure out this guy in the neighboring town that was 7 miles up the road named Jeff Bryant kept getting grant after grant after grant. And I finally picked his brain one time before we went into business together, and found kind of the successful template to use. And luckily, by Jeff's direction, we've been able to get a lot of grants for not just his department, my department, but our entire area. And I think that also helps with the volunteerism. You know, when people see both the firefighters and the EMS folks on our department see that we're trying, that's a big deal. And I also think that when the community sees that, so every time we get grant funding and we make that extra effort to, you know, to help lessen the budgetary impact without having to go to the taxpayers for money, I think they appreciate that. And we've been rewarded then, you know, in many cases. And a good example, we upgraded to a 12-lead Zoll monitor for our ambulance, which we're a basic level ambulance that can upgrade. And about a $30,000 investment, you know, to put that in service for our community. And between a couple of grants and funding we received from just local people donating, we almost had, I think it was 75, 80% within literally a matter of days. That people came together. We saw checks even up to $10,000 from community members that said, listen, we know what you're doing. You guys are always there for us. You know, you've always, I look at every call to you guys as marketing. And we try to be there for those people and always be nice to them and follow up. And this gentleman said, you know what, you took care of my wife in her most dire time. And here's $10,000 as a thank you. And I think that's very important to be nice to everybody all the time.
Oh, the whole be nice thing that Bruno said all those years, two very easy words to follow, you know, and we did something years ago that I thought, and I know some departments still do, the city where we allowed our volunteer fire department to use their PO box, their mailing, their mailing code, you know what I'm saying, their mass mailing code, I guess it is, not their PO box. And we did a raffle ticket. We sent like 2 raffle tickets for $5 a piece, raffle tickets to every mailing address in that city, you know, with a self-addressed stamped envelope, you know, or an self-addressed envelope. And I was absolutely astonished by how much people put extra money in there. The old codgers, they want to actually stop by the firehouse and give it to you and all this stuff. And it was another means to make money, you know, for the department without, you know, and people can spare, you know, $5 here or whatever, a couple dollars, so on and so forth. And that, John, you talk about the importance of being politically connected, and I mean that in a bad way. You've actually reached out to some Congress people, some senators in New York in your area to help you guys get some stuff. How important is it they have those relationships?
That's true as well, depending on, you know, what either the political structure is in your state. In New York State, obviously, you know, state senators and state assembly people, they have access to some funds, and some of them are grants, some of them are other things. And if you can appeal to these folks and make the case for a need that you may have that's going to serve the community, they're not going to buy a new bar for the back or a racing wagon to go, you know, or a new softball team uniforms. But if it's something to serve the people, if it's equipment, if it's firefighting equipment or EMS equipment or telemetry or whatever it might be, we've had very good success with that, at least recently. There is a political element to it, obviously. There's a personal relationship between the fire chiefs and some of the local elected officials, and obviously you have to maintain that if you can. I've smiled at people that I really would rather kick in the shins, but you know, sometimes it pays off in the end. And in the end, my personal opinion doesn't really matter anyway. You know, you're really just a spokesperson for the department and a provider for the neighborhood and for the community. So sometimes you just gotta zip it up and say what you got to say and do what you got to do and make things better for your community.
Well, and Craig, we were talking before, close, almost just short of 40 years in the fire service. When your observations, whether you're out teaching or traveling, what stands out to you when you see a volunteer fire department, kind of like an Amboy or Sublet, that just, they just, you look at them and go, they got their act together. You know what I'm saying? What are some of the things you see from those volunteer fire departments that just tell you right off the bat, they got their, what together,
I think really it comes down to the key aspect becomes the leadership. And you can tell that it seems like the moment you walk in the door, you see the pride in the organization. They may not have the newest, the fanciest building. They may not have the newest, the fanciest rigs, but you walk in, the building is clean. The rigs are ready to go. You got hose loads that are loaded so that they're going to come off of the rig when you pull them. The things are taken care of. So right away that your folks have got a sense of pride. And that pride for the volunteers, I believe, is driven from the leadership down through the rest of the organization. So, when I show up at a Sublet, or I show up at an East Dubuque, or I show up at at Amboy and out with Chief Bryant, and I walk in the door, I see a huge amount of pride from the folks that are there, and I see that being driven from the leadership that are managing that organization. If you've got the cranky leader who has no vision for the future, no vision for how to take care of their residents, not willing to work hard, wants to criticize all of the things that the people who are doing their absolute best to get there and provide services when they can, it rolls out in a demotivational force that significantly impacts your organization. So I think really the key when I show up and I'm working with those volunteers, it's really that leadership aspect that I see that turns the tide on whether an organization is able to provide quality service or they just kind of exist. And when they're in that mode, they're struggling with getting volunteers. They're struggling to get folks in the door, and they're struggling to keep them. I mean, I think all volunteers, my favorite question when I go out and I'm getting ready to teach a class, I say, okay, at 2:00 on a Wednesday, how many folks you got coming? And the standard answer, if I had to average it all together, the standard answer I get is 2 guys. I got 2 folks coming at 2:00 on a Wednesday. I think that's where an awful lot of the volunteer fire service is at. And then we go follow that up with, okay, well, what's the plan? What do you do? Well, we call mutual aid. And then when I call mutual aid, well, how long does it take them to get there? And who are they bringing? And how many folks? And all of a sudden you roll into, you're 20 or 25 minutes into an incident, you have 6 folks on the scene to actually go to work. And in today's environment, with the changes in construction and products inside, 25 minutes into an incident, that's a difference between we're going to make a stop and we're going to burn something up. But so I think all volunteer departments seem to be struggling in that area, or an awful lot of them, the majority of them are struggling in that area, being able to get those volunteers in the door. But I think how you actually get them in there and how you keep them in the struggles that we're seeing in the volunteers, it's really that key leadership of your organization.
Well, and that's such a great point you make, because it's about, I said, the great leaders always have their hand. John, I talk about they have their hand on the crank and the morale siren. They're figuring out ways. And I met my co-host sitting right there, my best buddy in the whole world, John Salka, in the early 90s. We start teaching in the middle of 90s, and John, over the years, I can't even count how many times I've heard you say it's all about leadership. Whether it's the hotel you're staying in, right, John? Whether it's the hotel, whether it's the volunteer department, whether it's the school, the restaurant, whatever, every bit of it's about leadership. And good leaders end up with a good following. I don't mean kiss asses. I mean they end up with people that want to be around. Who wants to be on the fire department with the company logo with the T-shirt that says "We suck less"? I mean, the competitiveness. John, you've always appealed to the competitiveness in the fire service, but the leader is key.
When we teach leadership, and I know all of us do, it's such an important, and I think we have it as a subtitle in most of our programs about leadership, even if just a segment of an officer program. It's the most important skill in the fire service, and really not just in the fire service. You look at the military, you look at private industry, you look at government, you look at anything. you look at hospitals and nurses, and leadership is where it's at, and if you don't, now listen, everybody can't be the best, everybody can't be the same. There's no prescribed, list of exact attributes and abilities. But the point is, folks that got good leadership skills, they always got a line of people behind them. They always got a full parking lot. They always got all the bays open. They always got, it's just amazing. And all you got to do is just look for the result. The result is the place that's got the full parking lot and the bays open and 3 rigs driving down the block in the middle of the afternoon for a call in a volunteer department. And you'll figure out what it is when you start talking to the chiefs or the company officers. It's not just one guy. It's not just the chief or the chiefs. I've been to places that had mediocre chiefs and fantastic company officers, great company officers who kept the place going. So even sometimes we've all gotten the letters, right? Oh, chief, went to your class, it was great, but my chief's not the guy that you described. My chief really just doesn't do this and doesn't do that. And we tell them, well, there's nothing you can do about that. You can't fire the chief, right? And sometimes company officers can inspire their following, their company officers and their senior firefighters to produce and get into the job and enjoy what they're doing. So leadership in 1,000 different ways and 1,000 different perspectives is obviously the most important thing.
Well, exactly. And that's why, because I knew, I've heard you say it so many times about leadership. It's all about leadership. And Craig bringing that up, which brings us to, to get to maybe Jeff and Nick here about this whole recruitment nowadays. It's not like the old days, recruiting people, in the old days, the recruitment retention thing, you could run out the door working for Billy's hardware store. Billy didn't care if he lost money when the siren blew. Nowadays, with competing demands and everything else and what's going on with families and stuff, it's so much harder to recruit it. And just putting a blinking sign in front of the firehouse saying, come volunteer, you've got to be aggressive with it. And there's so many, the National Volunteer Fire Council is an incredible group, incredible organization. And they've got resources for recruitment and retention. And I'll say this, guys, I think I may have, John knows this one, I may have told Jeff about this before, I'm not sure, Nick and Craig, but we were teaching somewhere, and on the apparatus floor, off to the side, there was like a pub ed trailer. And I went, oh, is that like a safety house, a pub ed? And they go, no, that's our recruitment trailer. And I said, what? They go, yeah, we got it through a grant. What it is we drag that thing with a pickup truck to every event, every Friday night football game, every craft show, every festival, every car, anywhere where they'll let us drag it, career day, whatever. And we walk over, and it was, nowadays with the skins, it was all skinned really nice with fire and with fire engines and maybe a Dingus Fire Supply Company logo or something, but all this really cool stuff all over it. And then they opened up the side, the big door, the big, like a food truck. And in there were two big TVs, and they started playing them. They had a video they did it just reels, keeps going. It shows them cutting cars apart and going to calls. And then they roll out some gear, and they had an air pack, and they had some tools, and they had pamphlets. And I went, God, I can't believe more departments don't have that, especially with the grants. And if someone like, the brain, as they call him, Chief Jeff Bryant, that can find grants I've never heard of before. God, it was such a cool thing to see. And guys, what I've said, to some of the chiefs out there before is, maybe try this when it comes to recruiting. Pick 3 or 4 of your go-to guys or gals, the men and women, your favorites, the ones you count on, the all-stars. And you call Jeff and Nick and Craig, and you come in, and John and Rick are saying, well, look, find us one more like you. Craig, somebody from church. Nick, somebody from your kids' Little League team. Jeff, a next door neighbor or a relative. Find me someone. Could you imagine if once in a while you said, find me one more like you? And that nucleus starts to build of good, special people. And then that whole thing kind of sucks the energy. So let's throw that out there to Jeff and Nick and whoever wants to take it. What are you guys doing recruitment-wise and retention-wise, which is, we hear that like it's a national crisis, obviously, when it comes to volunteer fire services. What are you guys doing on that end to get people on board and to keep them there?
Yeah, well, as you said, it's a crisis out there. Again, last 2 weeks ago, we went 37 miles for mutual aid. We responded. So it's not just a local problem. It's, it's region-wide, nationwide. Small career departments, small volunteer agencies are struggling. like I said, we've been very fortunate. We've received a couple grants, one through SAFER. We just received one last week through the for rural EMS. So, we have some funding and some other mechanism. I tell you the one thing that 1988, a lot longer for Chief Selka and Chief Lasky and Chief Haig, is that they didn't tell us we had to be good marketing people. And we probably should have took marketing 101 probably shortly after we came out of the fire department, because that's what we lack. We lack twofold. One is getting to the right people to come on the department. Number two is letting the community what you're not doing, what are you doing for them. We do a lot of good every day, and everybody sitting on this platform, that's their main thing, is they really do a lot of good. It went from hey, we really don't want to brag, or we really don't want to. A lot of us are probably not self-centered people that are great people, but we don't do enough to tell our community what we're doing and that what the need is. I mean, they're assuming we're going to be there, but we're doing more and more to help assist other communities, and they're assisting us as well. But that's one thing, is marketing is where I feel we're failing for recruiting, getting to the right people. It's exactly what Chief Lasky said. We found out that we are our best recruiters too as well. We know which people to bring on. I tell you though, in a little bit right now, selling some of Gordon Graham's and Nick Dingus's famous words, bringing somebody on to with the agency that has to do over 80% of EMS, looking at the pandemic and what you see on TV every day. Their concern is that we're bringing them into an environment that's a high frequency, high risk. Or we're going to expose them to something. Before, we could never say that. We didn't have too many high risk, high frequency events. We had a low frequency, high risk. It happened very seldom. But again, I think they're looking at if they watch the news or watch their email or anything else they get, the hundreds of emails you get a day, Chief Haig, on COVID, depending on what side of the county you're on, is the high risk, high frequency that we might be exposing these people to. And I think they're saying, and I'm really surprised that we didn't lose a lot of volunteers, because a lot of them saying, especially their non-transport units, they're assisting their local volunteer or regional county ambulance, saying, I didn't sign up for that. When it first came out that people, all you see was death or career ending, or people that were going to be not 100% recovered respiratory damage. So those are the concerns that we had. And I really kind of sat on my hands wondering and worrying if we're going to lose a lot of people, because that they're saying, I don't want to take it home to my mom. I want to take it home to my kids. I don't want to take it home to my wife or my husband who just recovered from cancer, that we didn't have more of that, losing more volunteers faster than anything else we've ever had done. I know I've seen a couple articles that there's some volunteer agency that they all quit because this wasn't really what they signed up to do. So I think at the end of the day, we have to figure out how to be better marketers of our brand. I know that, and I know that Chief Selka will tell you, I think probably, maybe 10 or 15 years ago about, paint a picture, a logo, let your guys paint a logo, of who they are. I don't think we've done enough of that. Maybe we need to get better at doing that.
Allow them to have the ownership. And I agree. Everybody here has said it. John, I talk about all the time. We suck at marketing. I tell people, if you go ask the public what your fire department does, stop a car in front of your volunteer fire. They go, well, they fight fires and they do CPR and they cut people a car, but they really don't know everything we do. And we don't, kind of like out of sight, out of mind. We try not to. And I'm like, nowadays more than ever, we need to be out there again. Now we're facing this pandemic, but what a great point, Jeff, you make with how difficult it is not only to recruit people, but to keep them because of, like you said, John, you talk about it, with a family member, you just, and whether it's a spouse that has asthma or breathing problem, or you have a child that has some medical issues, all of a sudden that kind of just pops into your head, doesn't it, John?
Yeah, and it's a reminder that all our members, volunteer firefighters, are really just a cross section of the community. They have all the trials and tribulations and problems and limitations that you read on and listen to on the news at night. Sick parents at home, or young kids, or kids that are weak, have different types of medical problems. And I have a couple of guys like that in my volunteer company who have, grandma and grandpa live with them. So with these young kids who live with mom and dad, and mom's mom and dad live there too. And this kid's like, Chief, we're all supposed to have those face pieces on here, right? I said, yeah. Yeah, because I got to be careful. My mom told me be careful because I got grandma and grandpa living at home, and you know they're more susceptible. Obviously, they're more liable to get it, maybe more liable to be hurt by it. So those are things we have to think about as well. And again, you can see all the things the fire chief or even a company officer has to manage at the volunteer firehouse. You press the button, you don't know who's coming through the doors. You know, you work in the A shift in Toledo, you know who's coming in. Lieutenant Smithwick and Fireman Jones and Fireman Brown. But when supplement grovers are on, I have no idea who's going to show up. Suddenly, boom, I got 5 guys showing up, and we got to try and limit that to some degree and make sure everybody's following the rules with the COVID and with the face masks and stuff like that. So every run is a challenge. Forget the run, forget the fire, forget the emergency vehicle response, forget the PPE. Just managing this COVID at the beginning and at the end of the run is a whole separate challenge for us.
Well, and exactly. And Nick, you know, we are going to be back to normal, or as we say, the new normal. Just like after 9/11, we had a new normal. We'll be back to our new normal. There's going to be a time where we're going to be able to do our fundraisers again, and you know, people should be washing their hands and not sneezing and spitting on people as it is, let alone when there's, you know, a pandemic going on. I had a group. John, I think you and I were together. I think I got in there a day ahead of you outside Charlotte and had dinner at a firehouse, volunteer firehouse. They had several departments there, and we're up in their hall. And after dinner, we kind of like did like a little round table. I know, Craig, you've done it. John, I do it a lot. They're like little questions. And one of the volunteers said, so Chief, how any ideas how we can get more involved with our local community? Because, you know, we do this, we do that. And I said, well, one idea that popped my head, on the way into town, I saw in front of the VFW, I saw one of those blinking arrow signs that said they got a food drive going on Saturday. And he goes, well, that's the VFW. We don't want to compete with them. I said, no, I'm not saying compete with them. Does anybody here have a relative who's with that post? And one guy goes, well, my dad's my grandpa's the former commander. I go, so why don't you do this? Go meet with the commander and say, look, we want to come help. We don't want to get in the way. This is what we want to do. Let us come and stand behind the scenes. Let us, you know, the truck, all these people can bring you food at the tables and you're going to be loaded. You guys don't need to be jumping out of the truck. Let us load the trucks. You guys stay up front. You take the pictures and you do the fist bumps and you know, smiles and the newspaper interviews, and we'll stay the hell out of the way, but let us load the trucks for you. And I said, not only are you doing that, but you brought this big red thing that says advertisement and you're parking it, you know, right there. It was the same thing in, was it Ohio? I think it was Ohio, wintertime. And they were saying the same thing. They said, we don't even have a gas station in our rural community. Our fire protection district doesn't even have a gas station in it. And so how do we reach out to people? I said, well, you have bad winters here, just like they have in 2/3 of the country. You know, you go, you get your list of seniors, and then you have people sign up and you start making phone calls. You start showing up at their house. You ask if you can walk through and check carbon dioxide. You check to make sure that the snow's not blocking the vent pipe for the dryer. And, you know, and all of a sudden their kids start calling and say, hey, Mom, how you doing? Oh, well, you won't believe the fire department showed up. The fire department, no. They knocked on the door out of the blue and said, we just want to check and see how you're doing. And I go, maybe you do a Saturday a month where you do senior blood pressures at your firehouse. You have people come in. Or I said, if you want to be creative enough, think about the things you would do for your own family or help your own family and go, how can we do that for our fire department and make some things happen? Nick, what are you guys doing idea-wise for Sublette to recruit there?
Yeah, and I'll be honest, it's not easy. And it's not easy from the standpoint of, you know, we have a very small pool. Our community is 450 people. And you think about it, we have 8% of our population's already on our running fire and EMS calls for us. So we've got about a 31-member staff right now, which we're very blessed. A lot of family members, obviously, are together in helping the community, but it's not the easiest thing. So, for example, we're going to go and do a drive in August at the end of this month. And we got all of our membership together. We sat down as a group and we said, okay, pick your friends that are in the community that are able-bodied, that are willing or would possibly be willing to help. And we derived another 45 names. And actually, in a couple of weeks, we're going to have a little cookout. We're going to invite all those people in and explain what we do. We've got a slideshow that's going to show, you know, kind of what you talked about, cutting cars, going to fires, helping people. You know, it's in many cases in social media, we see when there's a fire, right? There's people taking pictures and all these other things, but not very often do we see that on the EMS side. You know, nobody's there to take your picture at 3 o'clock in the morning to lift grandma up off the floor. So we try to recognize those folks on the EMS side as well. We're lucky enough to have a couple of saves over the last year, one with our 12-lead monitor, one with some Narcan. And we try to recognize those crews. And I think that's one of the things that these young people want to see is themselves, right? You go back to Maslow's theory of hierarchy, right? And it's self-actualization. People want to be recognized. People want you to understand that they have needs, and everybody ticks differently. Some is based on money, but in many cases, people just want that recognition. And we try to recognize them on our own department, both internally. I always say praise in public, discipline in private. And we're able to do those things, and we utilize social media to do some of those things. We probably still don't do it as good as we can. And we always try to be respectful, of course, during EMS calls, accidents, and even fires, because we don't want to show people at their worst time. However, if the people are willing to allow us to share those pictures, we do. And I think that's been helpful for us in recruitment. We're hoping to maybe add somewhere between, I'd really like to add 6 EMTs over the next 6 months. We've got an aging EMT population on our department. We have 14, which for a small town, we're very lucky. However, 4 or 5 of those folks have been doing it 20 to 30 years. And,
Wow.
and I think like everybody else, they're kind of, I don't want to say at wit's end, but between paperwork and where our hospital is located, if you turn out during the day for an EMS run, it's a 2.5-hour turn, in some cases 3. And that's not easy when some of these folks have been doing it for 20 and 30 years. And as most of you guys know, we, Jeff's department and my own, we protect the world's largest campground. So it doesn't sound like much, but when you go from a town of 450 to 30,000 on a weekend, it's not uncommon for us to run, 6, 8, 10, 12 calls in a day to this campground. And, the wheels are always turning, and that's time away from their family. So we try to be respectful of that to try to not burn our folks out either. In terms of the retention side, in addition to the social media and trying to recognize these folks, we created an accountability board. So when all of our folks walk in, it's got every member listed in roster format based on you're an officer and then years of service. And every call we get, every training we get, you walk in and you see that. And we mark down every member that's there. It's really big. That way nobody misses it. That way when people are coming in to visit or come in for training, they see it as well. And my belief personally is visibility creates accountability. And what we've seen since we implemented that is some of the people that maybe weren't as active as they were in the past are now really active. And you don't have to call them out. You don't have to say, hey, chief, hey, lieutenant, you're not showing up. You're not making the runs in the middle of the night for EMS. Instead, you're seeing that, and the others are holding those folks accountable because you're seeing their name. You're seeing how many runs they made for the week, the month, the year. And to me, that's been extremely powerful. And it's been good for us thus far.
Well, and I think you just handed my best buddy, John Salka, another quote that visibility creates accountability. John, that's for that. I mean, God, you've talked about that forever. One of the things that Nick and Jeff and Craig that John talks about often on our shows and in class is the whole mutual and automatic aid thing, for career departments and especially for volunteers. Craig, you've been instrumental with MABUS. For our listeners that don't know, the mutual aid box alarm system has been there forever in Illinois, and it went national. Yeah, it did national, and it's great. And talk about the importance, and John talks about this a lot, of having the plan. Jeff mentioned travel 37 miles, mutual aid. How important is it to have that plan set ahead of time to know who's going automatic and who, especially like in some of the parts of North Texas, when they bump out a structure fire for one volunteer fire department, one station, you hear 3 sets of tones because they're not just dispatching 1, they're dispatching 3 right away, sometimes 4 because the 4th one's on standby to fill in. How important is it to have that stuff ahead of time, in place?
Well, from what I can see, whether it's in the career side, and we've been very fortunate here in the Chicagoland area to have had MABUS start here and then grow and become the model that it is. But whether it's that side or whether it's the volunteer, I think having that pre-plan, we call them box cards, but that preset plan of who's going to respond is huge. I think it becomes even more important today than what it was in the past. And especially when you think about the challenges that we're facing in the volunteer fire service. One, the fire dynamic changed on us. I mean, we've got a different fire that we're going to based on the structural design as well as the flammable liquid, the hydrocarbon that we formed up into your TV and your microwave and your chair and your couch inside of a structure today. So those things are going to progress much faster than what we ever have seen. You know, in my 30 plus years, fires are moving faster today than what they were back when I came on. We don't have that luxury of time as we used to. So if you think about it from the standpoint of it's 2 o'clock on a Wednesday, and I know that when I page that call out, I'm going to get 2 firefighters coming. To have those 2 show up, get on the rig, respond to the scene, pull up on a scene, and especially if you got somebody trapped inside of the building where you need to make a quick grab or do a quick search, and you got nobody coming behind you until you get on the scene, and then say, okay, who am I going to call? And let's see, I know that East Mudflap's they're going to be able to come, and they're going to have 3 guys. And then, you know, I've got Leesville over here. I'm going to grab a couple of those. When you pull up and you got somebody trapped in a building, you're trying to make a quick save, or you got the world burning down around you, and you got 2 of you at 2 o'clock on that Wednesday afternoon. That's not the time to start figuring that out. So I think the pre-planning, the pre-staging, the getting those companies on the road, getting them moving earlier is going to make, I think it makes a huge difference in how we're doing business today, and it makes it more critical than what we've ever had in the past.
Yeah, it's a lonely feeling when you turn around and don't have the help there. And if you only have yourself to blame when it comes to that stuff, when you said East Mudflap, and I took East and West Mudflap always from my mentor, my good friend, Chief Tom Freeman. Yeah. And Tom's the one that says, you know, you should never if you turn around and you don't see any help there, shame on you, because the fire and smoke are telling you everything. They're telling you, I'm going to burn this now, and I'm going to burn that next. Or you don't keep, and my buddy John always says, when you show up and one building's on fire, when you leave, that's all that should have been on fire. John, you've talked, just like Craig, how many times have you talked about, what you always refer to it as you should have the takeout menu in front of you, you know, determine who's coming and who's not. Like you said, Craig said it, in the middle of the night, now they got to get up out of bed, right? And they got to get to having that ahead of time is so important. You say it all the time, don't you, John?
And, you know, obviously, most of the work that we do is very, very time oriented. You know, whether it's a fire or somebody trapped in a vehicle out on a highway, most of the work that we do, there's somebody waiting there for us, maybe in pain, maybe in anxiety, maybe trapped, maybe injured. So getting people on the road quickly is important. And I think it's taken us decades to realize that when we get there with our little engine and realize that we need more help, and we call for it, that's just the pagers going off and guys now leaving their job or rolling out of bed or coming out of the yard and driving to their firehouse, starting their rig up. And when we can get that stuff just so automatic, and we do it in South Blooming Grove now all the time, we've had not limited manpower, but reduced manpower compared to what we traditionally have. So we have an automatic response. We have pretty much a linear district. So we have 2 departments, 1 at each end. And depending on what end we're on, we're automatic with them. If we get a structural fire or an MVA, Salisbury Mill sends an engine on the alarm with us. Our tone goes off and so does theirs. And I'm jumping in my car thinking, oh man, that chief's going to beat me to the scene. Their chief is taking off the same time I'm taking off, right? Which is, that competitive thing is neither here nor there. But the point is, their crew is responding, getting on the rig, starting it up simultaneously with mine. So if we need 2 engines, guess what? I got 2 on the road right from the get-go. And, you know, if it's at the other end of the district, we got Monroe coming. And it's worked out wonderfully for us and for them both. And we get plenty of people turning out, and it reduces response time. It increases the level of service that we're able to provide to the people that are waiting for us to get there.
And right, who doesn't want to go to a call? I mean, who doesn't want to go to a fire or go to a call?
Zero cost. You don't need a budget for this. All you need is a phone call and an agreement and a handshake, and boom, you get people coming to help you.
Exactly. And, you know, for our listeners, before we close things out, we have a couple more things to cover with our guests, but just a reminder, you're listening to the Command Post on Fire Engineering. You got Chief John Salk and Chief Rick Lasky, and our very special guest for this show, Chief Craig Haig from the Hanover Park, Illinois Fire Department, Assistant Chief Nick Dingus from Sublette, Illinois, and Chief Jeff Bryant from Amboy, Illinois. John, let me throw this back to you. Then I want to look at Jeff and Nick, and then Craig. We didn't talk about stipends. I know there are some paid on call fire departments. There are some departments where once a year, they get a check that helps them with their gas money or whatever. I know for the longest time, Aspen, Colorado, Chief, my good friend Rick Ballantyne, the chief there. What a great guy. Been there a bunch of times from Rick. I think his assistant chief, his fire marshal, his secretary, the only career people. Everybody else is volunteer. And I showed up the night before one of our classes. I went to one of their meetings, and everybody's there, and they got their uniform shirts on. I'm like, the whole room is full. He goes, well, you know how we do that. He goes, if you're a member in good standing for a year, we pay for your family's health insurance. 100%. I went, what? We pay for their health? I'm like, oh my gosh. So I started asking, well, yeah, man, 1 year in good standing, there were calls, meetings, all this stuff, showing up. I'm like, and then you and I, we were in, for the longest time, I'm not sure if they do it, Calvert County, Maryland. I forget, tons of volunteer firefighters in the county. They'll actually pay your college tuition. If you're a member of 2 years good standing, which you can start at 16 years old as a volunteer there, they'll pay for your tuition, your fees and books. Now you can't go away to college because I remember, John, I talked to you about, I'm like, God, there's always cars in the parking lot. And they go, well, that's because if we pay for your tuition, you have to commit to so much time during the day and the evening and even sleep it. They have like bunk rooms where they have volunteers come in. And the guy that brought me out there at the time was a lieutenant with the Senate Capitol Police. And he goes, this is how I got my bachelor's and my master's. And I go, do people leave after? He goes, very few. He goes, everybody stays. And I go, God, how much does that cost? He goes, I think the most it cost the county 1 year was like $135,000. I said, what? He goes, think about it. Not everybody's going to college. He says, that's a drop in the bucket. If we try to fund this, we can't go career. We don't have the money, but could you imagine?
I'll tell you, another great example is one of the guys from South Plymouth Grove retired, went down to South Carolina. He was a New York City cop. He retired. He went through the ranks here. He was chief. He was a great guy. Went to South Carolina, and he's in a combination department, a lot of fully paid stations, but then some of the stations are combo. Make a long story short, he joined the volunteer aspect of this fire department. It's a big fire department, 20, 30 stations, and they get paid by the call. I think it was about $15. They get paid for the call. So if he makes 5 calls, 5 times 15 is what he makes for the week or for the whatever. Also, they have standby. If you come and stand by the firehouse for like 3 or 4 hours and sign in, that's another $15. Sometimes you get a run while you're there. You get 15 for that. And I'll tell you what, he said, I come here every morning. He said, I come every morning. I work out. We got a nice gym in the firehouse. I work out. I spend my 2 hours working out. Then I take a shower, cool down, hang out with the guys from the rescue who are paid. And there's a paid rescue there. And he watches TV for a couple of, and he goes home at lunchtime. He puts about 5 hours in. So he's getting 15 every day. And then he takes a couple of runs in during the week. I said, what was the best month you ever had? I think he had I think he said he had like $1,000 month one time, that between working days and taking runs in and doing a little bit extra stuff. And you know what? And it turns out not to be a really big dollar item for the fire department because there's not a whole lot of guys doing it. But he said it's like a little part-time job, and it's what I love doing anyway, So there's a lot of creative ways to do that if your system allows it. New York State doesn't allow you to write a check to a firefighter for anything. If you're a volunteer, you're a volunteer, and that's that. They can't give you gas. They can't give you reimbursement for anything.
But you've got a retirement program, though, don't you?
Oh, we do. We have a very good retirement program. Yeah, so LOSAP, right? Length of Service Awards program, which works great because we got a bunch of guys that probably would have faded away by now, but they're staying in because they're getting their points and they're earning their points, and then they're going to get a little pension check down the road. They're going to get a little monthly check when they turn 62, which is, will help out at that end of their lives,
Well, and I've seen the places, Craig, Nick, and Jeff. Again, John and I talk all the time about this stuff, but I've seen it where they've actually built coach homes. One department out in Washington State actually built, it was very rural, kind of mountainous, and next to the firehouse, it was like this nice little like apartment building. And they go, well, we rent them out when they're old, but we allow our volunteers to stay there, and they don't pay. And I was recently at a fire department where I taught, I want to say Pennsylvania, that you live there. These guys, there's a college there. We've talked about colleges, a lot of things. Well, Nick, you probably know what I'm talking about. This place, they actually lived I was there. It was like everybody had their own dorm. That's where they lived. That's where they got their mail. That's where they everything. They didn't have an apartment. They lived at the firehouse with their volunteers.
Geneva, New York's got a bunk-in program, and they don't have to be college kids or anything. Just if you bunk in and spend a certain amount of time in quarters and take runs in, they got about 4 or 5 bedrooms up there with a common kitchen and a common workout room and stuff like that. And they got 5 live-in guys that take in a lot of runs.
Oh, exactly. Nick, did you go through that?
I did. At Western Illinois University had a very similar program that they ran from the late 70s up until I think the late 90s. I was actually one of the last groups to go through and lived there for 3 years. And in my opinion, it was invaluable. So 2 of us lived in the firehouse. We had a dorm room. We were the supplement to the career guys. So anytime we were not in class and we were at the firehouse, we went on calls. So we got a free room out of the situation, which was awesome. And we got paid $100 a month, which was great. And we got a ton of training. So all the training, I had my basic level firefighter, which was called Firefighter 2 at the time. I got my EMT license while on Macomb, and got some invaluable experience of running 3 years in a kind of a smaller city. So it was great. It was a wonderful time.
Oh, like I said, and there's a lot of ideas out there. I don't know, is there, and I'll look at Nick and Jeff, because you're currently with your volunteer departments. Anything going on in Illinois, stipend-wise, or anything that you'd share that someone else might steal as an idea for their state or their area?
Yeah, for our area, so we're actually kind of in the midst of, and Jeff can weigh on this as well, but where we're trying to I won't say get around, but trying to adhere to the minimum wage laws in the state of Illinois. So we're actually having to pay now on every run. Now we do hour for hour, which is, when I started, we got $3 a call. So a flat $3. So if you were there for 1 hour, you were there for up to 6 hours, you got $3. And I think it went to $3 an hour after 6 hours. And then we changed it a couple of years ago to minimum wage. And that was just to help staff people on the ambulance. And they got paid a bit more than fire. Now everybody's at least minimum wage. Officers get like an extra $1 or something, but we pay out once a year. And the chief, and they've done this forever, you get a paycheck in December, 2 weeks before Christmas. And, it's not a lot of money, but depending on your activity, it could be a couple, $2,000-$3,000 for some of these folks, which pays for your Christmas gifts for your family. It also pays for my golf membership. So that's, I try to make as many calls as I can. And so it's just a lot of fun. And I think that our folks enjoy that, getting it once a year, because that's our little bonus, I guess, if you will, for helping out for the year.
Very, very cool. Very well. Let me throw something at Jeff here again before we close things out. Jeff, advice, again, you know how much we all brag about you guys that are guests here today, but when it comes to grant writing, if someone came up to you and said, Chief, help me out, where should I be looking? What advice, what are the little secrets you have, without turning this into a grant writing show, because wording and how you do things, like Nick said, is everything on how you submit things, but most people don't even know where to look for the grants. What advice do you give them? Because I know, let me say real quick to our listeners, John, you remember me talking about this. I had a guy email me about, he was looking for information on SOPs and SOGs and recruitment and training programs for volunteer fire departments. And I said, oh yeah, I've got the guy. I copied Jeff Bryant, and this is probably to get you inundated, buddy. But anyway, like 20 minutes later, this guy's like, oh my God. He's like, Chief, this guy's incredible. He goes, I see, and attached to this email was like 50 documents on everything you needed to run your volunteer fire department. But aside from that, Jeff, what advice do you give to the guy or gal asking, where do I start with the grants? Where do I look?
I think the first thing is start in-house. You need a needs versus a wants. I mean, there's a lot of different things out there. Sometimes they don't really is a priority, but you can start chalking up some of these other items. Rob Peter to pay Paul. Come up. Chief Haig's really good about coming up with a great plan of basically what you need to replace and when, or other items. He's done for us. We started probably 5 years ago with a replacement plan. So we start looking at those replacement items that we have to do, and what can we replace now, what can we replace later, and if we can get it funded or partially funded, that robs some money to do some of those things that maybe not be a need because we got those needs handled earlier, but we get some of the things that we want to make our service better. I would tell you that there's a lot of great people out there that does a really good job at finding grants, and they share. There's actually some good services out there that do a good job at low cost even. So the biggest thing with grant writing, and 20 some years ago, it was internet and a computer. Most departments didn't have one. When AFG first started right after 9/11, you can go, and Nick can tell you, we loaned them computers to do their own grant. And there wasn't, people didn't have, the small departments didn't have internet and didn't have computers. Today, that's not a problem. It's everywhere, but now it's time. Who's got the time to do it? And again, the biggest thing is going out and making a cookie cutter of your village, your town, your district. What sets you apart from the next person? Because it could be somebody like Chief Haig that don't know where Mudflap, Texas is. So what makes Mudflap, Texas better than Mudflap, Oklahoma? Why do you need it? So, go out and paint a picture of your community. And usually, Chief Haig has some great guys on his department. Ethan's one of those guys. You go to Ethan and say, hey, what makes Hanover Park different? It might be diversity. It might be, you have this clinic there, or you have this school there. Again, all these things that from somebody on the outside reading it, again, why? Why does A, Hanover Park need it, and B, why are they more important than, again, the Mudflap, Oklahoma? Myself and Nick, like I said, we've done a lot for our communities and our neighboring communities because we believe in sharing, because if we have an incident, we know they're coming with that thing. There are some people that don't share as well, but there's some, is time. I think time is one, and then the other one is a lot of people just say that, they're not going to get awarded, and I actually say that's not true. You just, every day, you just got to think about how to get these things funded. There's a ton of programs out there. This last week, Amboy, our department here, Amboy, we received $145,000, $20,000 related to COVID, but it's robbed Peter to pay Paul. So now we're paying Peter back a little bit because of the supplies, and then that frees up money for other projects. And then, we got this is the first year that the rural EMAX grant was funded. It was the U.S. Senator Dick Durbin's pet project 10 years ago, but it's never been funded to this year. So it basically pays for people EMTs, paramedics, pays for all the things we have to do when they come on board, such as physicals, uniforms, PPE. So those are, and again, you look at your budget, and when you already had planned so much for that money, even if you're small or big, you got to pay for that. You free that money up for other projects or other things. But like I said, if the biggest thing is time, there are other people out there that can help you. I can guarantee you that. So
perfect. Well, hey, before we end things here, because we're going to ask you guys each to kind of sum things up for us when it comes to this, our topic. Nick, you wanted Jeff to comment on something. I missed it in the scroll there on our comments about, we're talking about automatic mutual aid earlier, about 2 weeks ago, having two fires total at the same time. Nick, are we talking his department at the same time, or how did that work out?
Yeah, well, it's just to touch on the automatic aid and how powerful it is. I know Jeff and I have been together in the fire service now for 24 years, literally since inception. And, we were strong believers in auto aid dating back, now probably 15 to 20 years ago. And we got our departments to come together on that, which it used to be where, one of our fire departments would get on scene. Somebody may or may not the determination that we need more help and more resources. By the time you call, you're 20, 30 minutes into an incident, and, you're always behind the 8 ball. And we started with automatic aid on fires. Then it went to automatic aid on accidents. And our departments, in my belief, work seamlessly together. So, when Chief Salka mentioned, the buggy racing down the street or the guys racing down the street to get to a fire and accident, it's no different here. And I think both departments have a lot of pride in being first in, and I do. Sometimes I try to beat Jeff to his own fires. I'm not going to lie. And I think he tries to beat us to ours, which is fine. But the other day we had we had two fires a half a mile apart. And when you talk about an automatic aid response, as well as a good pre-planned mutual aid box alarm response, we have one. And Jeff pulled up on the first fire, and he had a fully involved barn, and I was in the buggy coming from our town. And he said, hey, do you mind taking the second fire? And we ended up, we ran two fires about, Jeff, half a mile apart. And, we split the cards, so resources were coming in. And I know I had 11 troops with me on our initial response. And our guys and gals after knockdown are like, we got more people coming. About the time the words came out of their mouth, we had neighboring communities showing up as we were splitting off resources. But we all work together. And I think that's, a testament to what Chief Haig has done and all the folks at Mavis, that it does work seamlessly. And as long as you train with those folks and promote that good working relationship, that you can accomplish a lot. And I can tell you in the incident that we had, and we ran, 8 fires last month. So we kind of had a busy month. Every time we were together, it was seamless. And the troops work together, and we clean up together and support each other, which I think is important.
Well, it goes back to the leadership thing that you guys talked about. Craig, you talked about the leadership end of it. We kind of joke, John and I, we know departments that refuse to run fires with each other because one chief called the other chief a boogerhead 20 years ago, and the public don't get fused. The public thinks we all work together. We all just, they don't get it. And I'm like, if you stood up at a council meeting or a village board meeting and had to explain why you don't get along with your neighboring fire department, would you really be willing to do that? And could you, it's so sad when you see those, like you say, Nick, it comes down to the relationships you have ahead of time, both personally and professionally, though, the professional side of it, that, hey, we may not even have Thanksgiving dinner together, but you call me, we're there. You know what I'm saying? So that's huge.
And I think one of the things, and Jeff and I talk about this very often, is I don't think the public cares what your patch says. They don't care where you're coming from. They don't care if it's Sublette, Amboy, Hanover Park. We're there to solve their problem. And if it's your daughter, it's your mother, it's your wife, that's sick or injured, or if their house is on fire, all they care is somebody's there to mitigate that problem. And, and if you can show up and do that professionally, again, it doesn't matter if you're a volunteer career or which patch shows up first, then I think we're doing the service to all of our communities, doing the best we can.
Outstanding. Well, hey, let's do our little round table here as we finish things up here. Craig, like I said, I love you. I know the panel does. We're all good friends and love you with my heart, not just saying that. Love you, man. What advice would you have? Let's do this. We'll do this little round table. John and I always do at the end. We always have like advice for the company, advice for the chief. What advice would you have for that volunteer fire department that's looking to get, and I'm not trying to embarrass them, looking to get like a Sublette and a Amboy, Illinois fire? I want to be like them. I want to be like Michael Jordan. I want to be like Mike. How do you get to be like Nick and Jeff's fire departments? What suggestion would you give them?
What jumps to my mind right away is the need to, as the leadership of the organization, and I think John laid it out. It doesn't necessarily always have to be from the guy in the very top spot, but players that are in the organization, really at any level. But I think that need to be able to vision what you want your organization to be. My good friend Heather Moore, Chief of Training for Springfield Fire Department here in Illinois, she always talks about what does right look like. And I think sometimes we don't spend a lot of time, and quite frankly, I think the reason that we don't is just because of the time associated and the multiple demands. And as I talk about the number of hats that you juggle as a volunteer fire chief each day, that you from managing your family to your real job to your fire service job, all of that time constraint, I think, prevents us from spending time really visioning, really thinking about what right looks like. And if we can then carve out some time to think about and come up with what right looks like for our organization, we can start then to think about, well, what steps can I take to start moving us down the road? What steps can I do to start putting us together so that we can head in the direction we need to go? It's not going to happen overnight. It may take you 10 years to accomplish a goal, but if you can vision what the future looks like, what right should look like for your organization, I'm a big fan of strategic planning. I'm a big fan of write it down, lay it out, come up with some goals and objectives, and start ticking those little things off as you go. Because for me, and coming up in the volunteer fire service with a fire chief that had a huge career position with 3M and brought strategic planning to the fire service before it was ever a thing for government. I remember him bringing in this planning, and we'd sit down and we'd vision and we'd write it down and we'd come up with goals and then objectives to accomplish that. And at the end of the year, we do a review. And the amount of satisfaction it brought to all of us to say, hey, we were after that goal, and look, there's 10 things we need to do, but we got 3 of them accomplished this year. Man, we really did some great work. So let's work on the next 3 for next year. And all of a sudden you start to see those things come to fruition. That's some huge motivation for a group of guys that want to give back to their community. So I think that visioning aspect and then writing it down is key. I think it's key in any organization, but I think it's a huge issue for the volunteer fire service.
Outstanding message, brother. Outstanding. Jeff, along the same, what advice would you give to that department that wants to do well as a volunteer?
Just get together and really realize you're there for the community and for each other. I mean, I think that's the thing that's lost the most, is that the more and more as the time goes by, from the 70s to the 80s, even back to World War II, you had a big push into volunteer departments because people were there. They wanted to serve. They want to continue serving. So you had fire districts formed right after World War II, and you had a big surge of volunteerism in all aspects, especially fire service. And again, people wanting to serve. And then as time went on, whatever that message was kind of faded away. And I think that the biggest thing, every day you wake up, you got to say you're there for the right reason. Whatever that reason is, you have to justify it yourself. But it's for your community. I would tell you that everybody's sitting at this thing. Colleagues. I can't remember the name of the game show, but where you can phone a friend or all those things. But I think that's what's here, because we share a lot. Might be I'm good at getting stuff. Nick's good at thoughts. Chief Haig's good at saying, well, I wouldn't do that. I was you. And then a long time ago, Chief Lasky sat at the table with me and said, sometimes you got to be that guy. And Chief Lasky, and that's what you got to be sometimes the catalyst to change. And we always talked about that. There's no place, John Selka would even say, there's no place for egos in the fire service.
Well, and it's funny, you brought up the history point about after World War II, so many people wanted to volunteer, and the volunteer fire department started to surge. There was it was like volunteering, so many civil defense back then, the whole civil defense thing kind of broke out with the blue and white trucks and all that. And then slowly you start seeing them merge, and boom, they became one. Most of the civil defense departments were out there after a while and all that, that all became that one department. And great history point, but great message. Nick, advice to that group that wants to flourish as a volunteer fire department?
Yeah, I think there's 5 keys, at least in my mind. The first one being communication. I don't think we can over communicate. That goes to family, that goes to business, that goes to life. It's trying to keep open lines of communication with your people, with your leadership, with your boards, with your community, both on the recruitment retention side, and letting people know what you're doing in the fire service. And then whatever directives you have as a leader, making sure that your people are going to follow that. So I think that's a big one. The second one is execution. Whatever those goals are. So as Jeff knows, Chief Haig, I think, knows as well, I'm a whiteboard guy. I've got 6 of them in my office. That's how we keep all of this nonsense that we do every day straight. And I look at it. So I'm a visual guy. I look at those things, but you have to execute. And I think by having those lists, by having those whiteboards, it's my cue every day to say, what can I get done today in the short term? What can I get done,
I think we lost Nick. We'll get Nick back in a second here. Hey, John, let me throw it to you as we close things out here. Nick was making some great points. You've been in the volleys a long time. You've seen departments that have made it work, and you've seen departments that haven't made it work. What were the difference between those two, the ones that made it work and the ones that didn't?
I mean, obviously what these 3 gentlemen have already said is very important, but long-term planning early on, I think, is important, especially in the volunteer fire service, where sometimes the chief isn't there forever. Sometimes they're just there for 2 or 3 or 4 years. And I think it's important to have some long-term planning up front when you're the new chief, whether you're a career guy or a volunteer guy, long-term planning. And then, as some of the other folks mentioned, you got to write it down. You just can't have a meeting and talk about stuff and not do it. You get some good record keeping done, put some long-term and some short-term goals down. And like Nick said, and then start checking them off and start, producing some results. And before you know it, 6 months, a year and a half, 2 years will be gone. Before you know, you'll have 6 or 8 things checked off, and you'll have some progress behind you.
Perfect. Nick, we lost you, I think, after point number 2.
The last 3 points, I'll make it brief, but accountability. And, we talked about that visibility creates accountability. You have to keep all of your officers accountable. You have to keep all the people accountable. Whether it's on runs, whether it's doing report writing, whether it's showing up to trainings and meetings, I think that's important. And they need to be able to see and make sure that somebody actually is watching. Next one is lead by example. As much as we hate it, I'm on a small department, and we only run about 200 calls a year. Jeff does about 500 on his department, but I try to make every call when I'm home. And that's not always the easiest. With a fairly busy travel schedule, not always the easiest to make those 3 a.m. runs. However, if I'm home, I try to make every one of them. And my belief is if my expectation is for all of those people to get up in the middle of the night and show up, I'm going to have to do it as well. And I think, as a company officer, as a chief officer, if you expect those folks to do that, you need to be doing it yourself. So I think lead by example. And then the final one, and I truly believe this, in life, in business, and in the fire services, you have to be a warrior. And you look at, anybody can be a hero, right? From the short-term aspect and the short side of things. But we're going to go out, we're going to lose some battles. Those battles might be with some of your coworkers. Those battles we might lose might be with your fire board. Sometimes a run doesn't go as good as it could, but listen, that's just a battle. I'm in this for the long haul. I think we all are. So we're out to win the war, and know and understand things may not always go our way every time, but as long as we know and look ourselves in the mirror every time and every morning and can say, you know what, I'm doing the best thing I can for myself, my family, my coworkers, my community, then I can go to sleep every night knowing I'm doing the best I can. So be a warrior.
5 great points. All great messages. Well, guys, let's close things out here. Chief Craig Haig from the Hanover Park, Illinois Fire Department. If somebody wanted to get a hold of you, Craig, is email the best way?
Yeah, absolutely. You send me a quick email. It's chaig, so CHAIGH @hpil.org. Send it to me via email. If you try to call me and go through my secretary, if she thinks with the exception of Nick or Jeff, if she thinks you're a salesman, she'll zap you into phone hyperspace. It'll take you an hour to get out. So just send me an email, and I can answer you then at 4 a.m. in the morning like I usually do, and I'll get you whatever I can to help you.
Perfect, Craig. Hang in or don't leave. We're going to visit very shortly afterwards. Chief Jeff Bryant, Amboy, Illinois. Best way for them to get a hold of you, buddy?
Emails as well. It's J Bryant, so it's JBRYANT 9962 @gmail.com.
Perfect. Nick, how about you, buddy?
Yep. Easiest way also is via email. It's my last name, Dinges, DINGES @dingusfire.com. So ndinges @dingusfire.com, or on LinkedIn, Facebook, or Instagram.
We're all pretty much on all those. Assistant Chief Nick Dinges from Sublet. And I have to say, I don't want anybody to think I was kidding. My love and respect for the Dinges Fire Company. John and I've said, John, how many times have we said, if you wanted to have the best business in the world, build a CAD system for dispatch that works for the fire department too, not just the police. Sell fire apparatus and back it up with good maintenance, and find a fire company that sells everything that backs up what they do and provides quality customer service. And there's my, and it's not a shameless plug, that right, John? That is, with all due respect, that is awesome. You guys are great. But thank you so much, John. Closing thoughts, buddy?
Well, it's great to get some different perspectives on the volunteer fire service, because it is truly, not only is it different from the paid, but even the volunteers in different areas with different, suburban and urban and rural. It's all so different. It's nice to get a group together with 4 or 5 people to talk about it, mix some good ideas up. Exactly.
And one last little message here to our volunteers. We love you. Stop picking and choosing your calls. I love you. When I started, they didn't tell me, just come up here for the exciting calls, Lasky. Basically my chief, Barney Sadowski, said, Lasky, I know you're Italian Polak, so I'm going to make this easy for you. There's this box sitting over my shoulder here. It's a Plectron. You're going to plug it in a wall. There's no lights on it. The little thing's going to glow. And when it makes a noise, it's either test night, drill night, meeting night, or it's a call. Tell you what, show up for all of it, because you should be coming to meetings. You should be going to training. You should make the calls. And you know what? There's always stuff to be done and clean at the firehouse. He didn't say just show up for the exciting stuff. You want to create a positive image. You want to keep your volunteer fire department vibrant in the community and keep it show up for the calls, even the ones you think are not the most exciting. So, hey, that being said, every one of us folks, we're on Facebook, Twitter, all our websites. If you're looking for anything with John and I, go to Fire Engineering Books and Videos, go to Amazon. Our audio books they're on Audible now, they're on Kindle. Please join us for our old school podcast we do. That's on iTunes and Audible and my YouTube channel. John, if they want to get a hold of you, best email?
ChiefJohnSalka@gmail.com.
And I'm Chief Lasky at gmail.com. And we never miss an opportunity with any of our shows to ask you in closing to please take care of the telemarketers that are coming in on your phone. But in all seriousness, in closing, we always ask you to please keep the men and women serving armed forces in your thoughts and prayers as well, especially right now, our brothers and sisters and our law enforcement family. They need us more than ever. And remember, folks, never forgetting means never forgetting. Be safe. Thanks for joining us, and God bless you.